welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. I am MongoSlade. This is our NXT End of USA, End of an Era review. We got a lot to cover. There is William Regal talks about his time in NXT, getting this thing started. Ethan Page on why he left AEW. We're going to discuss some of my favorite moments from NXT on USA near the end. But we start with the NWA is leaving the CW app, and NXT is apparently migrating their content over to the CW app away from Peacock. So this information comes from WrestleVotes, so take it with a grain of salt, but it's worth discussing because I did look on Peacock as I was looking to watch some old episodes of NXT, and I saw that it says like 6 days left or 8 days left or whatever. And I was thinking, what was that about? What's going on here? And then I think 2 or 3 days later, I see that NWA is leaving the CW app and that NXT is migrating its product over there, but it's not everything. So if you go to the Peacock, not everything NXT is moving over to CW. It seems like they're going to do, I guess they're doing it in chunks, I suppose. But here is the story from WrestleVotes to give them their fair courtesy. Some guy named Joey said, when they make their debut on CW, NXT episodes will no longer be available on Peacock. If you're into watching the show after it airs a day or later or whatever, you can't do that any longer on Peacock. In addition, Peacock is going to start pulling NXT episodes that previously aired. We're not sure if that's the entire library dating back to Finn Balor and Kevin Owens and Shinsuke Nakamura and all that stuff, Full Sail, that really got NXT going. We don't know if that will disappear, but it's likely that everything from NXT 2.0 up till today will disappear and move over to the CW app. Now let's pause right here, because a lot of the stuff I was trying to watch was actually older than NXT 2.0. It was actually really early NXT, like when Seth Rollins was there. So that stuff seems to be stuff that's leaving. And I thought Peacock was pulling a Netflix where they was rotating stuff out, like they was pulling stuff down and then they put it back up later or something. But apparently now I'm seeing this and I'm saying, well, maybe this is what's going on. Let's get back to the story. It says, with that said, we don't know if takeovers are included. It could just be 2.0 stuff, which would include deadlines and no mercies and things like that. That could disappear. A lot more recent NXT stuff will be gone from the WWE Network / Peacock. And he says another thing to touch on there while we're talking about NXT is WWE's Hulu contract is coming up next week. The NXT secondary show Level Up will be discontinued. That's what we're hearing. They will no longer continue filming the Level Up show that airs on Peacock that features a lot of younger NXT talent. A lot of moving parts right now. We would just say goodbye to Level Up. So, Level Up, the B show to NXT, apparently was I don't know if it was a Hulu exclusive, but I'm pretty sure it was on Peacock. I don't really watch Level Up, but the younger talent need the reps. So I would imagine they just want to create a specific show for the CW app, which I would suggest and prefer. I prefer to keep giving these kids reps. So, but the story of the NWA losing their spot, everybody was talking about this beforehand, right? Because shortly after NWA was announced, NXT was announced, and there was a lot of questions about how these things were going to coexist. And then a lot of people was like, okay, they're going to coexist fine because, the old regime wanted the company to be exclusive on CW. But with the with the MLW lawsuit and all that jazz, they were going to give up on that. But no, it's bad business to have a similar product on the show. Like, maybe because maybe NXT as a product, you could say it's not worthy of it. If it was Raw or SmackDown or something like that, maybe. But when it comes to NXT, maybe not. I would say no exclusivity is important, period. Now, does this mean that NWA is gone off of CW in general? Well, we don't know that yet. But we do know, and I think it's been confirmed by some higher level wrestling journalists, that it is leaving the app. Now, they have uploaded a new episode, this week's episode of NWA, onto the app. So we don't know how long there's going to be crossover between the two. But I'm not really a huge fan of the CW app. I actually prefer Peacock because I have upgraded to Peacock, so I don't have to watch the commercials and everything. So moving NWA off of, the app, CW app, so what? I kind of watch NWA every once in a while. I'm not tripping on that, even though it is unfair to them that they keep having to move around. But that's what happens when you're a small fish in a big pond. You got to move when the sharks move, right? But NXT, I like watching old episodes of NXT. I like watching old NXT pay-per-views. That's going to be a pain in the ass to watch that stuff with the commercials now. Unless there's, I'm not paying. I'm just going to, this is not even waffle on this. I'm not paying to use CW just so I can avoid commercials. Now, my question would be, are NXT's pay-per-views going to be on the CW app? Because that would be a real value to CW if NXT, like Halloween Havoc, is going to end up being on the CW app. That would be interesting. Or is it going to be on Peacock and then migrate over to CW app afterwards? I'm interested in how that's going to shake out. They haven't made an announcement yet, and I'm thinking they'll probably save that for the first episode of NXT. They'll try to iron out how in the hell they're going to explain the content moving around, but they certainly need to prepare people before they started doing it, because it looks like it's happening. Of course, I'm not guaranteeing this. I'm just reporting what I see. So if it doesn't happen this way, blame them. All right. So William Regal decided to respond to the video package, a really good video package they put together, celebrating the USA era of NXT. And he says, I was a part, except for H's family, part of the very beginning of WWE's NXT. I'm still involved, but not as much as I was. Thank you to H, Sean, Matt, and everyone else that fought the fight of making a 1-hour program on the WWE Network, to traveling the world and making new stars and memories for the fans. It continues today. Doesn't matter what the color scheme is or was or has been. We changed the wrestling world. Although few will want to admit it, it's been the best part of a 41-year career, being NXT to the core. That's amazing. My question is, he says we changed the wrestling world, although few would want to admit it. I actually do agree. I think NXT did a lot. It brought the hardcore fan back to WWE, which is not necessarily a good thing, but that's what it did. It brought all the indie graybeards back to WWE, which is what they want. It gave them somewhat of an alternative product to Raw and SmackDown and all that stuff. And they did a really good job, Those early episodes of NXT were kind of rough because the talent was so green. And then they brought in a bunch of indie workers, and the talent, and the shows magically got better. But then again, it stopped. Again, I tell people before, it stopped being about developing young talent, and it started being about making sure all the indie workers got 15, 20-minute matches on the show. Everybody else, not so much. And so then when they got moved up, Triple H had added so much to Nakamura and Balor and Samoa Joe and all those guys. And Triple H was completely overlooking like Alexa Bliss and Bianca Belair. And, if Triple H had his way, Bianca never would have been a star, neither would Alexa Bliss or Lacey Evans. You got to push Shayna Baszler. You got to push, what was her name? Ember Moon. people with all the in-ring talent in the world but zero charisma. Uh, that's not what the business is. Speaking of zero charisma, Ethan Page says that he came to WWE for more opportunities. So it didn't seem like it was a money issue with AEW. It seemed like he was stuck in a rut and he needed a fresh coat of paint. He needed just to go somewhere else and do something different. And he achieved that. And sometimes in life, you do stagnate. And I don't know how long he was in AEW. I think he was at AEW about 2 years. And he was not progressing. And he saw that he had the ability, or at least he felt he had the ability to progress and do more. So he took a chance, left AEW, came to WWE. He didn't know that he was going to be made the NXT champion almost immediately. I'm pretty sure they didn't tell him that in negotiations. But he came for the opportunity, and he was rewarded with that. Now, of course, it helps, I guess, that he's buddies with Cody, but whatever. But that's kind of how sports works. If you're sitting on the bench for one team and you think you can make the starter on another, sometimes you make that sacrifice and you jump ship. You know, a lot of AEW fans got tight-assed about this. Again, you can't get tight-assed about these kinds of things. Talent are going to make what the decision that they think is best for them. And sometimes they know what's best for them. You know, sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. And it worked out for Ethan Page, at least for now. And we can all evaluate how he is as a top guy. And I think he's falling short, but, you know, he's a mediocre talent. And being on top of NXT is fine because everybody's green around him. And he at least has some level of experience, I guess you could say. And he could help the young talent. But I would much rather see NXT invest all this time and energy into other people. But, okay. Building up a talent who been around for a long time and treating him like a measuring stick, it's fine. It's basically like him being an Intercontinental Champion. He doesn't feel like a top guy, you know, main event, face of the company kind of guy, which is what takes us to the show. They did a series of press conferences throughout the episode for the various big matches on the card. And that's for next week. So all of the main matches for next week got a press conference. So Ethan Page basically said he dreamed of being a main event guy and carrying a company, and he doesn't think CM Punk will be a factor in his decision, in the decision over Trick Williams, and he's going to make sure of that. So he went and found CM Punk, who was, you know, but CM Punk was talking to Trick Williams first, and Punk said basically he's not going to play favorites. He's going to go call it right down the middle. When he talked to Ethan Page, he said the same thing. Ethan Page talked about how he didn't appreciate Punk getting in his business, but Punk says, hey, if you're the better man, if you're as good as you say you are, I will put the belt around your waist. But if you're not, I won't. So then at the end, Trick Williams had to cut a promo where he talked about all the things he learned from Pete Dunne about being confident and controlling his temper and focusing. And he wants to be the leader of NXT. He wants to be the guy that takes NXT to the new heights. And I thought the press conferences were okay. They did one for Fatal Influence. They did one for Obafemi. These things were all right, you know. The questions didn't seem like real questions asked by real people, though. So that would be the knock against it, I guess you could say. They felt out of place. So the first match, Kalani Jordan defeated Ren Sinclair to maintain her grip on the Women's North American title. Speaking of which, Fatal Influence do want to fight Kalani Jordan, but they're still dealing with the Jada Parker Lola Vice situation. Jada Parker and Lola Vice was told that they were going to have to team up next week to fight Fatal Influence, and they haven't picked which two members will fight yet. But Jada Parker and Lola Vice will fight them next week. All right. So I'm guessing the two of them are gonna fight Lola and Jada, and then the third one is going to end up challenging Kalani for her belt. probably the following week. But Kalani is incredibly athletic. She's good. And Ren Sinclair she's not bad too. She actually looked pretty good here. So this was probably the best showcase for Ren Sinclair in a while. She looked less like a jabroni than ever before because she didn't have like one pant leg like she usually does. So this was all right. She's still kind of a dork, but it fits her character, I guess. They had a Grayson Waller effect with Nathan Fraser and Axiom. Grayson Waller called them Kurt Cobain and a Power Ranger. I chuckled a little bit. Of course, they teased some dissension between Grayson Waller and Austin Theory. Fraxium called themselves the Grim Reapers of the tag team division because everybody they beat seems to break up. And then Nathan Fraser says, why is this place called just the Grayson Waller effect? Shouldn't he just be called Grayson Waller and Austin Theory effect? So Austin Theory being a big dumb butt, he was like, hey, yeah, why my face ain't on this? Why my name ain't on this? And then the fight broke out just to distract him. So they beat up Fraxium. They're going to be wrestling for the titles in 2 weeks, I think. Next thing you know, A-Town Down Under, they went and they started bothering Siobhan Evans and Cedric Alexander. As Cedric Alexander was talking about how he can help Siobhan Evans figure out a way to beat Randy Orton. And Siobhan Evans was glazing Randy. Oh, you're one of my favorite wrestlers. I was like, ugh. So that ended up in a tag team match, which ended up being pretty solid, except Siobhan Evans and Cedric Alexander, they lose because Axiom and Nathan Fraser came out there and made a scene by getting into a shoving match and an argument and everything with A-Town Down Under. I know the Wrestling Observer newsletter crowd are absolutely pissing up the wall. Anytime Javon Evans loses, those guys get really upset. They love him. I didn't have any idea until recently how much they like that guy. I didn't know that Meltzer and Alvarez was tweeting behind paywalls about this kid. They love this guy so much. I like him too, but he's 19, and his whole gimmick is that he's bouncy. It's like that's not much. There's not much to that, man. The only problem is I probably would make him look stronger so that when he wrestled Randy, he can look good. And Randy could put him over strong, not to lose to him, but make him look good, make him look solid. That would be my problem with this, is that he lost here, so and the next week is so packed. I can't imagine that he's going to wrestle next week. I'm talking about Javon Evans. I just can't imagine they're going to squeeze him on the show. So that means if you're seeing him for the first time, he's coming off losses, which is not the best thing in the world, because you want to be able to show a video package or something to put people over how good the young guy is. But if he's a loser, then what can you do? Hank and Tank defeated the Good Brothers. Oh my God, I had to watch a Good Brothers match. That was awful. Moving on. Lexis King was the voice of reason against Oro Mensah. So Lexis King talked about Oro Mensah having dad issues and then related it to his own dad issues. So his dad was not there at all too. And that's why Oro Mensah wants to reside everything with violence. Because this is after Oro Mensah jumped him in the barbershop, which is hilarious. So they actually shook hands at the end of this, as Lexis King said that, he wants to be the bigger man. They went out there, they worked, and Oro Mensah won, and Lexis King just let it be. He lost. He lost via like some kind of roll-up or something like that. And there was no backfighting. He didn't attack him later or nothing like that. That was weird. That was a really weird direction for the character. I'm guessing they just don't know what to do with Lexis King. They're just not sure what to do. But I like that they went back to his character's original motivations, which is he's not really sure about who he wants to be. If he wants to be like his dad or if he wants to be different from his dad. So Obafemi and Tony D'Angelo will be on Miz TV next week. And Tony D'Angelo had a training montage to prepare him to fight for Obafemi. This training montage was phenomenal. So Stack says, Oba Femi is just a man. You just got to be more man than him. So they go to this ratty old gym, and it's like Rocky. You know, he's doing chin-ups, he's doing pull-ups. He's boxing in the ring against some huge black dude. He looks familiar, but I don't want to say like a name and then be wrong, and then he'd be like, you think all niggas look alike. So I'm not going to say that, but he looked familiar. The story is Tony D'Angelo had to get his eye of the tiger back. That's what it was all about. Oba Femi says, I wasn't paying this no attention. The man's broken. I looked in his eyes. He's broken. It's over. So Oba Femi don't care that he's out here hitting the gym hard. I love this montage, though. This was really good. And it really gets to the heart of what the Tony D'Angelo character is all about. Now they're trying to get into the Rocky thing, but he's cocky, he's confident. He got to get his confidence back. He's been humiliated, you know. So he's got to grow his set. He's got to go out there and put in the work. I appreciate that. Next, Ridge Holland defeated Riley Osborne, but they continue to fight outside the ring after the match, with Thea Hale screaming and trying to keep them apart. They crash through the barricade, because everybody crashes through barricades now. But this match is okay. You know, Ridge Holland is ain't not much to write home about, but it wasn't terrible. Wendy Chu and Rosemary defeated Carmen Petrovich and Brinley Reese. They were distracted by Shani Theodonis, who was walking around with a flower. He's been giving out flowers every week. And he was walking around the backstage women area. I don't understand how you keep getting in the women's locker room where they got sofas and stuff. Anyway, after Jabberjawn with Carmen and Brinley Reese, he goes over to Tatum Paxley. And this is where business actually picks up. Because he's like, ooh, freaky. Me too. And then he kneels down and he says to her, what did he say? He said, you don't scare me, baby. You excite me or something. And then Tatum Paxley said her heart belongs to someone else. And he was like, ugh. And so he leaves, you know, Adoniously. He can't do anything else here. But he decides to show up in the middle of their tag team match to distract Brinley Reese and Carmen Petrovich. He gave the flower to a random woman in the crowd, which distracted Carmen. So she left the ring post to go out there and tell him to beat it. Brinley Reese looks up and all she sees is that Carmen is talking to Ashanti. And then she turns around and gets pinned by either Rosemary or Wendy Chu. I don't remember which one. So they lose. But they're teasing that Brinley Reese and Carmen Petrovich are probably going to have a problem with this. And I need the Brinley Reese character to have a little bit of edge to her. I was thinking about that right before this match started, that she probably needs to turn heel. Or, you know, they need to turn Carmen. Because Carmen's kind of boring as a babyface too. You know, it would be interesting if she would try something different. But having them feud over Shanti Theodonis is pretty silly. I guess just having him be the wedge that was driven in between them can work. Because he is kind of an instigator, but it's fine. I just want more for these girls because they seem to be hitting a ceiling, especially Carmen Petrovich. She hit a ceiling. They did a backstage segment for Wesley and Zachary Wentz, where they kind of did one of those. It was kind of like the Riddle and Seth Rollins meme, where it wasn't official. Like, you know, the Rollins and Riddle meme, where they did it, and then they said, well, can you still hear me? You know, kind of like, what was that, John Jones and Evans. What was his first name? Rashad Evans. That thing. But this time they just did it when Wesley was like, can you hear me? When can he hear me? And Zachary was like, I hear your bitch ass right now. So they started going back and forth with Zachary calling him a bitch, talking about him jumping Trey from behind, how he's going to beat the F out of him, and saying it and, you know, going ahead and getting it bleeped. So Wesley says, yeah. Just make sure that Gigi ain't watching next week. So Zachary Wentz, now he's really triggered. He's like, don't talk about my fiance. And then Wesley's like, what you gonna do, bitch? Like, what you gonna do? So then Zachary Wentz took off his microphone. He left. So Wesley, of course, is sitting there like, oh, he want to fight? So he takes his microphone off too. And they go backstage and they brawled a little bit. This is fine. You know, Zachary Wentz's acting is god awful, bro. It's not good. It's not good acting. But they did mention, of course, that, you know, his girlfriend works at NXT, so that's good. Maybe they'll do something together eventually. If she ever comes back, Nikita Lyons, Cora Jade, Gigi Dolan, these chicks ain't returning no time soon. You ain't even hearing about them coming back. I think Nikita Lyons just started working out again. She's been gone pretty much the whole year. And she's just now starting to work out again. And I think it's the same thing with Cora Jade. She's just now starting to really, well, I guess the ACLs have started getting ate up, so maybe that's the problem. But Gigi could be fun with Zachary Wentz as a pair on TV. If they add her like Lita to the Rascals, that could be fun. That could be really cool. I'm assuming, of course, that they're still going to be working with TNA when she comes back. But if they treat her like she's the Lita to the Jeff and Matt Hardy of the Rascals, that could be really cool. You know, that could really add something to both of those guys, because you always add something with a pretty girl. All right, so the final segment was Julia and Roxanne Perez press conference. It was real bad. Julia doesn't speak a lot of English. As a matter of fact, this segment was so bad that Julia's first response was fully in Japanese. They had Funaki, SmackDown #1 announcer. He translated it, but his English is also bad, so they put the words on the screen. So she's talking in Japanese. He, I guess, is writing it down or something. And as he's saying it, you can see it on the screen because his English is also not good. Roxanne Perez does not get any reaction when she talks, like no reaction. So she talked about being a big Julia fan and how, you know, she's the reason Julia is there. Julia came looking for her. So this is a dream match for Julia. Julia then called herself the most feared women's wrestler in the world, and she's going to make Roxanne feel the beautiful madness. It was actually in English. So they set up with all these press conferences, with all these supposed figures asking questions. And that's what this segment was too. It was a press conference, so everybody could ask questions. So then a random voice popped in, and everybody's like, what's that? And then we look up, and it's Stephanie Vaquer at the screen saying, what you gonna do when I'm on the other side of this women's championship match? And everybody's like, oh, she's in a smoky room. I'm like, okay. All right. They showing that the division is stacked, which is good. And I would have preferred, if we being honest, that Stephanie Vaquer went after the other title, the North American belt. Because I feel like Julia probably should beat Roxanne and run with that belt for a while. Kalani has already been champion for about a month or two when it comes to the North American women's title. And you could use Stephanie to sort of help elevate Kalani, but also she could elevate the title. And I think that would be a better move. So I don't really necessarily like Stephanie being in this position. I would have preferred for her to show up after Kalani's match. I think that would have been better. But otherwise, the segment was terrible. It was terrible. You got Roxanne Perez, who cannot move the crowd at all with her vocal ability. She can't get them to boo. She can't get them to cheer. They're just bored by her talking. And Julia she's got something to say, but we're not sure what language it needs to be in. And then her translator is not that much better. It's like Funaki has been in WWE for 27 years. Didn't he come in at like 1997 or something like that? And I think he's been there the entire time. Like, Funaki knows where the bodies are buried at this point. He probably knows the names of all the women that Vince McMahon was sleeping around with, yeah? And his English is still minimal. Like, I'm pretty sure his English is very good. Maybe it's his pronunciation. But my goodness, I was like, oh, this is so bad. But Funaki being with Julia is fine. I think that's fine. So they're building up Julia and Roxanne Perez like that's going to be the main event. Even though CM Punk is hitched to the NXT Championship match, they're building Julia and Roxanne Perez like it is the main event of the CW show. I'm not sure it should be. It should probably be the opener. It's an exciting match. It's a big match. It shows off immediately what NXT is all about. In terms of the girls, you probably get a title switch in that match. So you start the show hot. And then you build the story with CM Punk, Trick Williams, and Ethan Page to the main event. Then the main event features a star that everybody knows on network television. That could really be good. I would do it that way. But overall, this episode of NXT was very lame duck. They brought in Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. Grayson Waller was wearing a see-through shirt. Like one of those Christian 1999 see-through shirts. It was terrible. And they brought in those guys because they weren't giving you anybody else. Trick Williams didn't really do anything on screen. Neither did Ethan Page. Neither did Wesley or Zachary Wentz. Neither did Obafemi or Tony D'Angelo. They did Julia and Roxanne Perez in front of the crowd. But mostly in front of the crowd was the Brinley Reeses, the Kalani Jordans, the Wendy Chu. They gave the crowd nothing. It was a complete lame duck episode of NXT. They really just built up next week and the week after. That's really all they did. They were preparing for the launch. They didn't give you anything on this show. Just a bunch of pre-taped segments, that were clearly taped last week because CM Punk was there. He ain't fly all the way back to Orlando just to do some pre-tapes. So he did all those pre-tapes last week. So essentially the show was almost over and I was asking the question, like, what is the main event? And it turned out to be Cedric Alexander and Javon Evans versus A-Town Down Under. But it still wasn't even announced as the main event. It was just the last match on the show. So they really did not care about this show at all. But let's talk about the end of an era. Let's talk about NXT on USA coming to an end. And I'm going to give you some of my favorite segments from NXT. And I'm going to give you some of my least favorite segments. So I'm doing this off the top of my head. I didn't take a list, right? So NXT's been on the air for 5 years. I guess you could break it down to the Wednesday Night War era, which was the first year or so. It was on TV. It was going head up with AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays from 8 to 10. Some really good stuff happened there because then, of course, that bleeds into the pandemic. There was some good stuff there. The Undisputed Era, they had a really good run there at that time. Finn Balor's return, I thought, was fun. Then they started doing outrageous things. Probably one of my least favorite things that they ever did is they had a fatal 4-way match. I think it was Finn Balor, Pete Dunne, Tommaso Ciampa, and Johnny Gargano. And I remember this match being, I think it was an hour-long draw. I remember being so mad at that match broke NXT for me. When they did that, I said, I do not want to watch NXT anymore. That match pissed me off. It was a 4-man Iron Man match, if I remember correctly. It was dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. It made me so mad. So mad. And I couldn't believe that they were doing that. This is around the time where everybody claimed that they were trying to have takeovers every week, even though they weren't. They had 2 hours to fill, so they were certainly doing more than they normally would. He brought the Cruiserweight title back, and Santos Escobar won the title and then unmasked to reveal that he was Santos Escobar. That wasn't one of my favorite segments, it was just something I remembered. The North American title was a big deal at the time. But you saw NXT sort of teeter and fall apart during this era. They started getting into some real issues. Velveteen Dream became a big problem for them. But you saw a real highlight, especially when we got towards the pandemic, whereas Keith Lee really became a huge star for NXT and was blowing up. They did that Great American Bash show that featured Io Sky versus Sasha Banks and Keith Lee versus Adam Cole. It was like a 2-week episode. They did the mistake of taping it, and then one of those dweebs from Induced Share actually spoiled it by posting a picture of Keith Lee with both belts in the air. I remember that. That was devastating. It almost seemed like he was actively trying to help AEW at that time. Because NXT was taped and AEW was going to be live, I think. So the Wednesday Night War era, not my favorite. Not really. It had some really good moments. The Keith Lee rise and fall was fun. Karrion Kross coming in was really good, except for when he got destroyed by Adam Cole. Adam Cole's run as the champion was a decent to fun time. His run against Finn Balor was fun. The return of Samoa Joe, no, that wasn't fun. Samoa Joe coming in as sort of the enforcer for William Regal, that was good shit. I really enjoyed that. That was during the pandemic, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So that was fun. So there was some good things. I like when they brought in the plexiglass for, their version of the Thunderdome, and they had the fans banging on the glass and everything. That would add some ambiance to the matches. I thought that was fun. So the Wednesday Night War era ended when NXT got renewed and they were moved to Tuesdays. And it kind of stayed there languishing until Triple H had his heart condition, and then they blew it up for NXT 2.0. And NXT 2.0 was fun as fuck. I don't care what nobody tell you. It was psychotic. It was immature, but it was an incredibly fun product. Right around the time of the actual debut of NXT 2.0, we got that insane wedding with Indy Hartwell and Dexter Lumis. I think that might have been the first episode of NXT 2.0. Was Dexter Lumis showing off and he had an axe. Like, that's one of the... He brought out an axe during the wedding. That was great. That was fantastic. That was my shit. You got to see some people finally start to break through. Braun Breaker made his debut. Tiffany Stratton made her debut probably a little bit later after Braun Breaker did. But like on a dime, NXT completely changed. The Wale theme song swept in. People started complaining about the color. Oh, the color scheme is bright. Why is it so bright? Why is there so many lights? Why is that? It's like they were doing the opposite of what Triple H was doing. And the NXT hardcores puked it up. They hated it. They couldn't stand it. You could probably go to What Culture right now and they'll talk about how much they hated NXT 2.0. But they don't understand that NXT 2.0 set up this version of NXT that we're all watching now, which is actually a lot more balanced than it was before NXT 2.0, right? So, and it's actually seeming more like they're going back towards the black and gold. But I'll talk about that when we get there. So, NXT 2.0, you started seeing a lot of new faces. Guys like Carmelo Hayes, who was on the roster during Black and Gold, but he's getting a push. Swerve Strickland, before he went to AEW, was finally starting to get a push in NXT 2.0. Santos Escobar is finally getting a push. Legado del Fantasma is finally starting getting some real heat behind them. They're trying to do something different. The NXT UK closure in 2022 brought over a bunch of talent. You saw Volta walk around in there for a while for NXT, which led to, I believe, Walter and Dragunov actually having matches in NXT. Walter and Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker ran him out of NXT, which I thought was great. That was a great match. That was right before the Gunther gimmick started, or the Gunther name was brought in. But NXT 2.0 is, if it's known for nothing else, giving us Carmelo Hayes, Tiffany Stratton, Trick Williams, and Braun Breaker. That's all it really needed to do. Some of the people clearly failed in NXT 2.0 because the gimmicks were too loud and too over the top. Wendy Chu being one of those characters that was working, I think, and then for some reason they turned her heel, but she also couldn't stay healthy. Nikita Lyons been a really big part of NXT 2.0, but she kept getting injured. Same thing with Cora Jade. Mandy Rose was a huge part of NXT 2.0. Really long run as women's champion. You know, really pissed off a lot of the hardcores because her run, I think, was even longer than EO's. You know, it was about as long as Shayna Baszler's. It was a really long title run, and they hate Mandy Rose. Oh my God, they couldn't stand it. That's why I loved it so much, because Mandy was getting so much better. Toxic Attraction was doing so good. You know, they were doing amazing work. And then all of a sudden, yoink, because Mandy was doing, I don't know, OnlyFans or whatever, Brand Army or whatever it is. They yoinked her. They killed that whole thing. I wish they would smarten up and bring her back. The whole storyline with LA Knight, they brought him in finally. They signed him during Black and Gold, but he really didn't get a chance to move around and do much until 2.0, when they brought in Ted DiBiase to do the storyline with Cameron Grimes. Now, Cameron Grimes also did a really good job in 2.0. They really added elements of his character that were really fun. That's when he became a Beverly Hillbilly, and he was just being a comedic guy who had tons of money. And they really told us a good story about Cameron Grimes and his relationship with money versus LA Knight and his relationship with money, and both of them in their relationship to this Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Championship. I thought that was some really good television that WWE was doing. That was during NXT 2.0. You know, being introduced to Trick Mello Gang. They brought in Trick Williams as the old friend of Carmelo Hayes. You know, the wisecracking. He's supposed to be like a bodyguard kind of character, but he has so much charisma that he almost overshadowed Carmelo sometimes. He's speaking in rhyme, and you know, he's got $1 million smile. He seems to be all put together. And then they did the Halloween Havoc, where they showed that he's not Carmelo Hayes' bodyguard at all, because he was more scared of the haunted house than Carmelo Hayes was. And that's where you can see the definite shift from Trick Williams being sort of a bodyguard, Diesel-like character, to him being more of a partner. You know, and of course he would take off on his own as he got more time on television. He was able to take off, but you saw so much growth, and yeah, you saw some people fall off. You saw some people not do so well. If you're an NXT purist, you saw a lot of the guys that you liked get beat quite often. You know, a guy like Kushida, I believe, you know, got mushed into NXT 2.0. Sarai, the young Japanese female wrestling phenom that they brought in, who ended up with a Sailor Moon-like gimmick. Everybody hated it. She apparently hated it, so she quit. But she wasn't there that long. I think she was only there for like 4 months or something like that. Maybe even longer, maybe like a year, perhaps. But she was only like 21 or 22 or something. So, I loved NXT 2.0. It was so over the top. It was so crazy. It was perfect. You know, it was horny as hell. It pissed off so many people. It pissed off all of the people who liked Black and Gold NXT, which I found incredibly boring, milquetoast, and overbooked. Because they were booking one final beat, and this match would be like 30 minutes, and they're kicking out of everything. and there's no crowd reaction, and you're like, holy hell, this is as bad as when they said Edge and Randy Orton was bad because the match was going on for so long and it's just grunting and groaning and sweating. That's all they did. That was supposed to be a cinematic match. It didn't feel cinematic to me. I haven't watched that match since it aired. But so NXT 2.0 was such a departure. They de-emphasized the wrestling element, really emphasized the entertainment, emphasized the characters, the charisma, the talent. They did interesting things, like they turned Cora Jade heel while she was a tag team champion on the person she turned heel on. Then had her throw the belt in the garbage. Like, that was really a space for them to launch her into the next level. She never actually made it because she can't stay healthy, but there was an opportunity there. But there were so many different people who started getting a run. They literally had to break this thing down and rebuild it. And the foundation was Roxanne Perez, Braun Breaker, Trick Williams, Carmelo Hayes, Ilya Dragunov when they finally got rid of NXT UK. Lyra Valkyria when they brought her in, and they really took the time to steadily rebuild NXT using young talent, primarily young talent, to build NXT all over again. And then, of course, Vince had his troubles. He got outed as being, I guess, a sex trafficker, or Iceberg Slim, or whatever the fuck he's supposed to be. And they rejiggered it. So what some people call NXT 3.0, or, NXT Silver, or whatever. This marked Triple H and Endeavor taking over NXT. And it became more of a mix. It became some more indie workers coming in, more talent from the main roster coming down. So Tiffany Stratton had broken through. She was finally doing well. She was a champion and everything. They brought down Becky Lynch to try to elevate her. And Lyra Valkyria and Roxanne Perez, and work with all these girls. That was fun. That was cool to see. They completely rebuilt the women's division because some of the people that they had as key players kept getting injured, like Nikita Lyons and Cora Jade. So then you started seeing Kalani Jordan step up. You saw Jada Parker step up. You saw Sol Ruka step up. And the women's division in NXT skyrocketed, over time. Partially that was because of NXT 2.0 breaking up the monotony of work rate obsessed female wrestlers that's now in people like Shayna Baszler and Ember Moon, who they brought back for a little while, and she flopped again. Like, she flopped in NXT twice, So even though she became the champion eventually the first time, she was a flop the second time, and she was kind of a flop the first time too. But NXT 3.0 is marked mostly by a better integration of veteran talent with young talent, with there being mostly young talent. And then you bring a veteran in to work with them. Like, it was nice when Dolph Ziggler went down to NXT during NXT 2.0 and was helping to work with Braun Breaker. That was some really fun stuff right there. But it meant more when it was Becky Lynch, because she was a bigger star. She wasn't like an also-ran. And also, they didn't have Dolph hold the belt that long. They let Mandy hold it for a little while. And Becky held it for a little while too, but she didn't have the title for a long, long time. And that was a positive. She didn't come down there and absolutely dominate. She did come down there and give platforms and give opportunities. Now, NXT 3.0, it wasn't my favorite because we started getting guys like Eddie Thorpe, DJ Tatanka, who was a signing from New Japan. Is not thrilled with that guy, but whatever. And they started making some of these homeboy deals like Shawn Spears, and to a lesser degree Lexis King. Even though I love how they started with him, he's kind of hit a ceiling where he's not really going much further than he's in right now. But throughout all of this, probably the number one act in all of NXT, regardless of the era, has been Chase University. It has been the most enduring and endearing act throughout the entirety of NXT's run. I believe Andre Chase started in NXT 2.0 or near the end of NXT Black and Gold. The guy, Andre Chase, he was actually hired in 2021 or 2020, one or the other, because he was Harlem Bravado. He worked for Evolve when the company went out of business. So he came over during that time, and Chase University, at first it was kind of silly, but it's been 3 years or something, like 2 or 3 years, and Chase University still gets some of the biggest reactions. Their storylines go on forever, and it's not boring. Nobody's ever said that they're sick of Chase University. People try to mock it. Like, there was people who were mocking, oh, they're going to put Okada in Chase University. Well, he might have actually gotten over if he was in Chase University. And they put people in Chase U and they get over. And either you're working with them or you're working against them. Either way, you're going to get over. Unless you're Gallus, because nobody cares about Gallus at all. And Gallus can work with Hulk Hogan and couldn't get over. But Chase University is probably the greatest act of NXT USA. And I say that 100% not being ironic at all. Brian Breaker came and went. Tiffany Stratton came and went. Carmelo Hayes came and went. You know, some of those guys were there a year, 2 years on NXT. Chase University has been there over 2 years. They had pretty much have Thea Hale, who when they brought her in, she was immediately put in Chase University. And she's one of the most over baby faces in the entire company. And that includes Raw and SmackDown. You know, the Andre Chase story continues to be entertaining. It is the bloodline of NXT. Like, The Way was kind of like that before Chase University, and The Way wasn't even together that long. But Chase University and the saga of Chase University is the bloodline story of NXT. It's perpetual. It goes on forever. You could put people in it, you could take people out of it, but it just keeps on going. And nobody ever gets sick of it. More people have said that they've been tired of the bloodline, or they're sick of the elite over on AEW, that have ever said they were sick of Chase University. Nobody says that. Okay. And these are not like the 5-star matches, greatest wrestlers of all time kind of gimmicks. They've had Andre Chase being abusive to the talent. They've had Andre Chase be a gambler. They've had other foreign exchange students come in. They've had, rebellious Thea Hale stories with other women coming in and trying to corrupt the institution. They've had, them trying to rehabilitate Ridge Holland. They've had all these stories mixed up in the Chase University saga, and they all end up working. Again, Thea Hale is one of the most over female wrestlers on the planet. She gets bigger reactions. Bullshit you not. She gets bigger reactions than Mercedes. All right. If Thea Hale was to win a championship on television, the roof will come off the building, because they've been waiting 2 or 3 years for it. And that's a mark of the consistency of the storytelling, the characters, the storyline that they've put together when it comes to Chase University. It's the greatest act NXT on USA ever put together. And that's just me being unbiased. If I wanted to be biased, I would probably say it'd be Tiffany Stratton. She would probably be second, because they did a really great job of introducing her. Daddy's little rich girl. And then they didn't have a male character to do the daddy part, so they kind of switched it up to the Barbie element. But, by that point in time, they were making her the champion. Basically, she was a young Trish Stratus mixed with Charlotte. And everybody thought that was fantastic. She was amazing. And the sun shined out of her ass. So everybody loved her. So that was great. So she'd probably be second. And Brian Breaker would be third. Now, Brian Breaker would be third because he was super pushed right out of the gate, and everybody could see how great he was. But he was just kind of Steiner, not Steiner, Steiner, not Steiner. And then he got bogged down in that absolutely dreadful feud with Joe Gacy and that absolutely awful stable that Joe Gacy was in. And Ava was trying to wrestle, and she's very bad at that. And she's not good at talking either, by the way. And the only reason she even has a job is because of who her father is. But she's young. I'm gonna cut her some slack. But he was bogged down by that whole shit with Joe Gacy. You know, but now you've got those would be my top 3 NXT on USA acts. Would be Chase University, Tiffany Stratton, and Braun Breaker. 4th would likely be Trick Williams, because we got to see the full storyline of Trick Williams play out on NXT on USA, from him going to be the homeboy, to him being the rival for Carmelo, to him being a star in his own right, and now him chasing the dream all over again. So it would definitely be 3rd, 4th. 5th will probably be Carmelo himself, because you got a chance to see him be a star, but he was positioned as being a star from the beginning. That would be like the main difference. So those would be the top 5 stars from NXT on USA. And I really had fun with it. Hopefully the CW thing is going to be better. Let me know what you guys think. And I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out. No one does it better.